Isn't it fitting that the first card to return to is someone that has literally returned from death magic space? Liesa, Forgotten Archangel, has reached a numerical milestone which I want to celebrate with today's video. We shall look even further into the design of Liesa, her card, a deck tag, her story and her philosophy. Of course, I could never do this alone, diving even deeper that is. So I have with me today two friends, Bones from Children of Alara, which is a great praise on its own, and tautog, who is a great voice actor, game designer and writer. As I have looked at the card in the first deep dive, I shall recommend that video, but I want to recap the card so that today's story and deck tag are great to watch and listen to on their own. Because Liesa is an amazing card and I understand why she is so popular. She is the Forgotten Archangel and she is one of 4 sister angels from Innistrad. All 4 have white as their predominant color and then one other color linked to their philosophy. Liesa's secondary color is black, an enemy color to white, because it is looking out for yourself instead of always for others. Liesa in her life and death seeks a balance in this. She cares immensely for her followers, but also she is not afraid to do anything to protect them and herself. Her card reflects the extent of her will. She would slay down enemy creatures by exiling them, while looking out for her own and resurrecting or maybe saving them from the boundless death that she just came from. Her art from Dmitry Burmak shows her inner turmoil. On the left we see the light making her wings seem holy, and on the right the dusk makes her wings feel weakened and darker. Her hair flows down and her gaze is pointing down towards the Abyssinian spear she holds protectively in front of her. One hand over it and one hand under it open to us. Duality is everything here, as is balance. Liesa seems downtrodden, but we learn that we have a weakened angel here that is also just introspective, as she has just returned to Earth. Her leg stance shows us that she has just taken flight from the city below into the night sky. She is taking her resolve. Maybe it might even signal a new beginning, an era. Now truly introducing my first collaborating friend, Bones from Alara. Tell us what you will be doing today, Bones.
Greetings and salutations, Planeswalkers of the Multiverse. Bones here. We at Children of Alara have teamed up with Slow Unpacking for this comprehensive breakdown of Liesa, Forgotten Archangel. In this section, I'll be going over 5 fun, functional, and flavorful cards that could be included in a Liesa, Forgotten Archangel commander deck. So without further ado, let's take a look at the lucky cards that made the cut into the top 5.
Now this might be a bit of a tease, but I want to first say that it is very impressive that Bones has found these cards that are flavorful and so mechanically fitting. So I will let him continue, but that is just an amazing feat of him.
We must know our enemies if we are to defeat our enemies. This is the tenet of Liesa, Archangel of the Flight of Dusk, lost sister to Sigarda, Gisela, and Bruna, the 4 angelic protectors of humanity on Innistrad, each assuming a different role in defense against the horrors that dwell on the plane. Liesa, the black sheep of the family, had a more unorthodox method than her sisters when it came to providing aid to humanity. She sought knowledge from the dark forces that inhabit Innistrad, so that she could better fight against and understand them. To this end, she would seek out the very creatures they stood against, consorting with not only demons and their cultists, but witches, vampires, and devils. While her sisters didn't always agree with her methods, they continued to stand, a unified front against the terrors of the night. That is, until Avacyn was created, her righteous zeal condemning Liesa for her practices and demonic pact with the buried lord. For this, Liesa and her flight were slain by Avacyn, and slowly the memory of her services to the denizens of Innistrad were lost to time. That is, until now. Thanks to her pact with the demon, Liesa was reborn centuries later when the buried lord was summoned by a small group of humans, hoping he would lend them his power. Seeing the demon devour the cultists who just summoned him, Liesa quickly returned to the role she had all those years ago, jumping to the aid of the defenseless cultists. But with her attempts to bargain falling on deaf ears, Liesa struck down the buried lord, saving the remaining cultists. Seeing the resurrected angel in her full glory, the surviving cultists pledged themselves to Liesa, becoming the first members of the new Flight of Dusk.
Now that's a great introduction to the story of Liesa from Bones, but I do think that we need to start at the beginning. And for this, I have invited my friend tautog to tell us the story about Liesa's resurrection and what happened after, in a little bit more detail. And as he is such a great voice actor, we can hear him truly bring alive the story of Liesa. I would like to introduce you to one of the best readers that I have ever met, and enjoy his voice.
The strange woman tilted her head, her expression peaceful. "I mean you no harm," the woman said. Despite the wound, her voice was very clear. She nodded at the dying sacrificial fire. "It writes, do you know what you have called forth? A deathless law to bring silence, to protect us from the vampires, the werewolves, to lay the risen dead to an eternal rest," Algli said, unable to hide the quiver in her voice. Something about the quiet grace of this woman unsettled. Even unarmored and at rest, she exuded the ease of an experienced warrior. "Deathless, yes," the woman said and shifted forward. "But the buried lord has never been one to protect. He is here, and he is hungry." In the flickering of the torch, Algli saw the shadows behind the woman were patterned, white and grey, and as she watched, the shadows unfurled into an elegant frame of raptor's wings. An angel sat before her. Algli swayed on her feet, nearly falling to her knees again. The old depictions of Avacyn, light-haloed, savior, guardian, all flashed through her mind. My lady," Algli said. Excuses bubbled up, for sacrifice, for grief, for losing hope, but she voiced none of them. "Are you here to judge me?" "No, not to judge, but to parley." The angel inclined her head. "I spoke with demons once. I was wind and I was silence. You will forgive me watching your sorrow and saying nothing." Why here?" "I know as well as you." The angel gestured to the remains of the goat. "I was compelled to answer your call." Hope rose in Algi, sharp, painful, but foolish. "Are you the buried lord?" she blurted. The angel's smile was soft, not mocking. "No, but I too once sought to parley with him, to calm the undead, banish geists, to bring peace, all that he has said and written. Be not mistaken. The silence he brings is only to amplify his own voice. The shroud he lays only to muffle and bind others. The only joy in his stifled world is the joy he feels." Algi swallowed, her mouth dry, her hand tightening around the hilt of her dagger. "My family is dead. He will ensure their bodies rest. You, too, deserve rest in your life," the angel said, meeting Algi's challenging gaze with sympathy, with trust, and to be heard, without bloodshed. Algi felt her old knees wobble again. To hear that she deserved rest, that such a thing could exist in life. A half-remembered dream. "And what am I supposed to do about it?" Algi asked. "Haven't I done enough?"
And here we learn that Liesa is an angel Of hope, yes, but also one that is not of judgment. She just parlays, as the story says. And that is why I think the next, or the first, pick from Bones is actually really relevant. We will see a card that shows us that angels could judge people, yes, but Liesa would save them as long as they work under her flock. Let's go back to Bones.
It goes without saying that Liesa is going to need a new Flight of Dusk with her in this deck. Other angels to protect humanity in her unique way. And what better way to start us off than with a rarely seen mono-black angel, Eradicator Valkyrie. A 4-mana, 4/3 angel with flying, lifelink, and protection from planeswalkers is a more than respectable stat line. But what makes this Valkyrie perfect for this deck is her activated Boast ability. If you attack with Eradicator Valkyrie, you can pay 2 mana and sacrifice a creature, forcing all of your opponents to sacrifice a creature or planeswalker in turn. While admittedly not the most angelic of abilities, it does symbolize the knowledge gained over the years of meeting with demons and other less than exemplary figures Innistrad has to offer. Plus, the creature you sacrificed has nothing to fear. Thanks to the Archangel's protection, whenever a creature offers themselves up to the Valkyrie's ability, they will be safely returned to your hand. Your opponents, however, will have no such luck, as whatever they sacrifice will be exiled, granted the blessed sleep. But one angel does not a flight make. Let's add another, Magister of Worth, a fellow black and white angel to complement our commander. You get a lot with this 6-mana 4/4 flyer. When Magister of Worth enters the battlefield, you put forth the will of the council, asking players to vote for grace or condemnation. If grace gets more votes, then the benevolent angel will return all creatures from all graveyards to the battlefield. However, if the vote for condemnation gets more votes or is tied, all creatures other than Magister of Worth are destroyed. Much like the Valkyrie before, Magister of Worth fits into the Flight of Dusk well, since both options being voted on play very nicely with our commander's ability. With Liesa on board exiling our opponent's creatures as they die, Grace will most likely be granting us a much larger boon of creatures than our adversaries. And if the vote calls for condemnation, well, our commander may fall, but not before saving the rest of her flock from destruction, returning our creatures to our hand at the end step. So either way the vote is cast, the odds should always be in our favor. With these two strengthening Liesa's flight, we shall now highlight some of the humanity they are defending. Peacekeeper is a modest 1/1 for 3 mana with the not-so-modest ability of preventing creatures from attacking. Now, this powerful ability is not without its drawbacks, of course, requiring 2 mana to be paid on your upkeep to keep the peace. Otherwise, you must sacrifice Peacekeeper. This downside, however, is mitigated by our commander. Is the board currently filled with monsters ready to devour the helpless? Pay the 2 mana and keep them at bay. But if you've summoned your full force of celestial and abyssal beings, then the human has done its job and can be sacrificed for the greater good. But worry not. Our commander will reward their bravery returning Peacekeeper to our hand, just in case we need a reprieve from those who go bump in the night.
And then we learn of Liesa's true calling, which is to learn about all that happened to Innistrad in her absence. She learns this from a young ritualist who was just looking to safeguard their village. Someone that had lost hope, and at the moment of actually losing hope, we learn that it was not only the demon's hunger that brought back Liesa, but also Liesa's connection with the lost. She had been forgotten, but she is also the perfect angel for Innistrad at this time, them having been ravaged multiple times with horrifying aliens on top of the monsters they already housed. The people of Innistrad could not help but push away those memories. They could do nothing but forget. Liesa will be there for the forgotten, for the lost, for hope.
We must move swiftly. Your so-called lord is summoned and prowls these woods, not as a savior, but as a demon, and he is ravenous. Your friends, I fear, are already dead. The angel braced herself against her spear and stood. But as she stood, the dark stain over her gambits and spread, and like a mortal, the divine being flinched. Ugly thought of pepper-bearded Lucio, and scornful Shruta, in the woods, pursued, and of her husband on his deathbed, and she held out her hand to bid the strange angel to pause. You can't save anyone while you're bleeding out. I may be a fool dabbling in works better left forgotten, but one of those works I've learned is how to staunch a wound. Sit back down before you go running off to certain death. Slowly, the angel sat again, her wings folding behind her. Your wisdom belies your age, she said wryly. A second death, having just returned, would be a waste, I agree. But I've been gone a long time, it seems. This forest is alien to me. Land perhaps more cruel. Pray tell me while you work, Algi. What has befallowed Innistrad in my absence? Your absence? Agli asked. She pulled her cloak off from her shoulders and set about ripping bandages from the hood. You went mad with the other angels, I take it. She tisked. No rest, even for the divine. I was killed, the angel said. There was a pause in her voice which made Agli wonder what she was hiding. Perhaps she had returned from the twisting corruption that had befell the others. I wandered, was scattered on the winds. You and your fellows were correct in one thing. The Berry Lord does not die. It seems that as a consequence of my dealings with him, neither will I. As for my sisters, you say they are mad? No, no longer mad, but dead. Many were lost. The flight of herons remains. Not enough to protect all of us. Ugly bandaged the angel's ribs firmly, while she tried to condense her misery into easy sentences. The telling of the travails was short. The fall of Gavany, the invigorated rise of the lordly vampires, the rampages of the lycanthropes, geists, and witches. The ruin poured into her accounting far short of any agony of living through them. She spoke of the fall of her sister angels, all but the Archangel Sagata in her flight, of the encroaching undead, the corpse trade, the rampages of the once pacified werewolves, of the deaths of her family, first to violence, then raised from their shallow graves to serve the whims of a ghoul caller. And why not call upon a buried lord? Ugly asked, her voice raised in defiance. Lucio and I deciphered the writings. We asked, who else is left to save us? The angel only gave Algli the barest of smiles. Understanding and sharing of the burden alone made tears rise to Agli's eyes again. You need not believe me to walk beside me, Agli, the angel said. Even it is merely to guide me to your lord. Tonight, you must raise your torch and dagger to save yourself. She refastened her gambeson over the bandage torn from Agli's helm, and stood, extending her hand to the elderly cultist. I am Liesa, Archangel who once led the flight of dusk. Come, Agli, for the future of Innistrad. Let us rebury this lord.
Of course, we cannot help but put creatures of the night in Liesa's deck. Just like the humans in her flock, Liesa does not mind seeing the possibility of dealing with zombies and demons in order to do what's right. She lives on a plane called Innistrad. Remember that this is inherently a plane of werewolves and vampires, and that being undead is not a bad thing here. It is part of nature. So why not embrace it? In fact, I bet that Everson killed Liesa because she knew she was the only one to doubt Everson's methods.
This next human is one Liesa would definitely be watching over, not only to learn their craft, but to shield them from the dark powers that would take advantage of their gifts. Apprentice Necromancer, or Doomed Necromancer, the two are fairly interchangeable here, offer themselves to the void to bring creatures back from the dead, just like the hapless cultists who resurrected the buried lord, and by extension Liesa. And just like in the story, Liesa can save these poor souls from their fate, returning them safely to your hand once their rites are complete. By now we've talked at length about this buried lord, the demon Liesa formed a pact with to learn his dark magic, the very one that also saved her from Avacyn's wrath. Sadly, there's no card printed for this demon lord, so we have to find a stand-in. And for now, that will be Woebringer Demon. While this card isn't immortal like its lore counterpart, it more than makes up for it by matching its hunger and mastery over death, slowly eating a creature from each player's board at the beginning of that player's upkeep until there's nothing left. Of course, we can control his demonic appetite, choosing to sacrifice the demon to his own effect to save our board from his gluttony. And much like the previous offerings, this effect is quite complementary to Liesa's. Whenever these two are on the battlefield together and our opponents make their offering to Woebringer Demon, Liesa exiles the creature, denying any graveyard deck that would normally profit from a free sacrifice. All the while saving our creatures, or the demon himself once he's run out of souls to devour. And those are the 5 cards I selected to highlight, but there are so many more out there that fit both mechanically and stylistically with Liesa Forgotten Archangel. You could add Angel of Finality to her flight, granting the blessed sleep to any creatures that slipped past Liesa's gaze. Whisper, Bloodlurgist, or Young Necromancer are more cultists looking to gain forbidden knowledge, desperately in need of her protection. And of course, Runescarred Demon, Razaketh, Vazagoth, and Vilis are all more demon lords ready to grant power and knowledge to those willing to make a deal.
With a demon half slain and on the forest floor, Liesa and her first followers stand to watch over the horizon of Innistrad, a plane that is lost for all accounts, a plane where forgetting is the easy way out, a plane where it is now time to remember, to build up, to look up and stand up, for the abandoned, for hope.
Algli rolled free of the demon's claws. She staggered. Liesa offered the old woman a hand and she took it, pulling herself to her feet with a wince and a limp. "I appreciate your help," Liesa said. She gestured at the carcass of the vanquished demon. Quick thinking. "Not as quick as I used to be," Algli muttered. "He talked too much for his own good. Lucio would summon a chatterbox. Oh, Lucio." The woman covered her face with her hands, choking back a sob. All this and you died for it. Fools. We're fools. If only we'd been charlatans too." "You did what you felt best," Liesa said, gently. "You did not raise the knife to your friends. You came with me to save them. Their deaths are on the claws of the buried lord. Don't blame yourself for being unable to predict the outcome. Were the writings you found about his spite? His hunger? No," Algli muttered through her fingers. "A hidden lord who dealt with light. A clever being who asked only silence, and who despised the risen dead for trotting on his domain. Yes. I too commiserated with him once," Liesa said. "If you had not called, I would not have come. Your voices were the first I'd heard in centuries, Algli. Your work isn't for naught." Algli shook her head, but her cracking sobs quieted. Liesa studied the fallen demon. "His body should have dissolved," Liesa murmured. "Perhaps he is material so long as I am, bound to this plane. I hesitate to leave his remains here. Who knows what power I still might." Algli raised her head, and behind the trail of tears on her weathered face, Liesa saw that spark again, that glimmer of hope. With a gasp, Algli fell to her knees again. Not in pain, not in grief, but in hope before her glimmering angel. "You have it," she said. "As I breathe in hope, my lady Liesa, you have me as your ally, for as long as I live." Liesa had returned at the darkest hour, a time of struggle, called by the desperate and the lost. More and worse lay before them, this small covenant. In the cold moonlight, Liesa felt that old hope rekindle in these words, in the shared knowledge, an oath of grief, an oath of hope, On a plane of endings, here at last came a new beginning.
And that was tautog's beautiful contribution to this astronomically deep dive for Liesa. As he did not plug himself yet, I will do so for him. You can find tautog on Twitter, where I find his design questions and assignments most interesting. Here you will find him rather open to conversation, and if you have been touched by his voice, be sure to compliment him on it, because he deserved it. Now, Bones, I would love you to tell us more about where we can find you.
Let me know what your picks would be for Liesa Forgotten Archangel in the ether down below. Or on Twitter. As previously mentioned, I am part of a group, Children of Alara, that you can find there, on YouTube, just about any social media or video sharing site. If you want to find me directly, I'm on Twitter at whispering_1. While not the most active member of our group on social media, I do enjoy talking about magic and many other nerdy adjacent things. But until next time, I've been Bones from Children of Alara, and I'll see you at the beginning of your end step.
Liesa is a beautiful card, but to me it has become something personal. I love creating stories behind the cards by taking my time to look at them. Liesa in my eyes is definitely not forgotten, and I would love to keep shining a light on the lost and the forgotten cards to be found, in the name of Liesa, the lost, and in the name of hope. Because Liesa's story is definitely one of hope.